This week I received a request from a viewer asking me to do a video to discuss the clothing that I wear for cross-country and backcountry skiing. Now keep in mind, none of the clothing that I wear has been given to me. I'm not sponsored by any clothing manufacturers, and my suggestions are just based on what I like for the kind of conditions that I ski. I'm going to start my discussion off today, and I'm going to start with the top, hats. And if you watch my videos much, you'll notice I use this purple hat an awful lot. And it's not just a typical ball cap to help the follically impaired. It's actually a Gore-Tex hat, and it's manufactured by OR. And the great thing about a Gore-Tex hat is that obviously it's waterproof and it's highly breathable. And I normally use in combination with that an ear band, and this is a good neoprene ear band. And the combination of the Gore-Tex hat and the neoprene ear band is enough to keep my ears warm. It keeps some of the sun out of my face, and it still allows a lot of heat to escape from the top of your head. Now hats are very important, and oftentimes they should be given a lot more thought, because you lose a lot of heat through the top of your head, and you also keep a lot of heat in the top of your head. So if you tend to be a person who skis with a real heavy hat like this happens to be a well insulated, I call this my Elmer Fudd hat. This is really good when it's cold out, but as you're climbing up the hill and you start heating up, you know, it's easy to flip it up a little ways and uncover your ears. But if you start getting too hot, your only other choice is to take it off. And when you take it off, then obviously your ears can get cold, and you can also expose your head to sunburn. When it gets colder, or you get to the top of a hill and you need extra insulation, you can always put on a stocking cap like this, and then the Gore-Tex hat goes right over the top of it. And you get all the good insulation on top of your head from the stocking cap. You also get the waterproofness that you need for this. If you watch my videos in the springtime, you'll notice I switch over to a white hat. This is a sun hat. And up here in the Rockies and the higher elevations, in the springtime the sun is just so intense that you just need that little extra bit of cover around your neck and your ears and your face. And also when it's warm, they're ventilated, and you've got some ventilation holes here. There's a whole array of sun hats. They work really well. They're just not waterproof. It's a great springtime hat. You can use it in combination with an ear band or with a stocking cap if you need some warmth. Lastly, I want to talk about the really extreme temperatures when it's very, very cold out. And what I have is kind of an expedition hoodie that's made by Outdoor Research, and it's synthetic and allows me to close off my neck area. It gives me good protection all the way around. I can use this in combination with a hat, and if you get that frostbite type of wind, it allows you to put on a nose guard, and you can have goggles on top of it. And that really, really, really works well when it's super cold and you're afraid you might get frostbite. And that can happen when you're up on top of a peak and you might have 30 or 40 mile an hour winds and it's 10 degrees out. So I'll put my normal hat back on, and I can't stress enough that flexibility is the key. Just like with all your clothing, think about layering. And layering is the key for your head just as well as it is for the rest of your body. Well, let's talk about tops. When it comes to outdoor clothing, there's really a few principles that need to apply. They need to be able to keep you warm, they need to be able to keep you dry, and they need to be comfortable for you to exercise, to move about in. And that can apply whether you're hiking or if you're skiing. Of course, in the wintertime, you know, the situation is even more important, because there's times when you're working uphill or working up a big sweat. There's times when it's really, really cold, when it's windy, and there's times when it's snow, you may have precipitations. There may be time when it's sunny and super warm, and unfortunately that can all happen during the same day. So the answer to that big question is layering. And like anything, it all starts with a good base layer. And base layers come in different thicknesses. I prefer synthetic. Some people like wool. Wear a thin one if it's going to be warm, or if you're going to be super active, wear a thicker one. If it's colder, you're going to be less active. And then you need something on top of the base layer. And this is probably my favorite skiing jacket for cross-country skiing. And I think it's my favorite because it's probably the oldest piece of clothing that I own. This is made by Sporthill, and my wife bought it for me as a birthday present probably 30 years ago. And it was my first introduction to Sporthill clothing. And it was pretty expensive at the time, and I'll tell you, after 30 years of skiing, we've really gotten our money's worth out of this. Now it's starting to get a little frayed and it's a little worn, and their fabrics and their coats of today may even be better than this one. But once again, when it comes to cross-country clothing for the lower elevations and not extreme conditions, I think Sporthill is my go-to source. Now Julie skis mostly Sporthill clothing, and maybe we'll put a section in later about her clothing. I also need some extra clothing for if the temperature drops, if I stop for lunch and you start to cool down, or if the wind comes up, or in the case if you're doing a long downhill ski, you're going to be a lot warmer going uphill than you will be on the downhill side. You need something else. You need to bring something else along with you for protection. And the standard that most people use these days is a puffy coat. Take your pick, down, synthetic. The good thing about a puffy coat is they go on quickly, they pack real small, and they provide you with just that extra bit of warmth that you might need. Now, it would be a real rare occasion where I would actually ski with this top on. They're typically too warm for that. It's always good to have, a good windproof, waterproof jacket, especially if this layer here is down. Any good product will work. This is the one when I'm cross-country skiing, I usually throw it in. It packs real small, it's lightweight, it's waterproof, it's breathable, has a good tight fit, it has a hood. And I won't even mention the brand because it's just a generic brand, and there's lots of clothing in this category that work. Well, let's talk cross-country ski pants. Now, over the years, I've settled into essentially two sets of pants that I use religiously. And my favorite are manufactured by Sporthill. And interestingly enough, the name of the pant is Sporthill XC Pant. And it's probably the pant I use the most. It's been around for a lot of years. It has proven itself over time. The pant itself is made out of what I would almost consider a miracle fabric. They call it 3SP. And I don't know if anybody else uses this fabric, but it is a perfect combination of warmth, breathability, has a little bit of water resistance. It's good and stretchable, and it's just darn right comfortable. They claim that it's wind resistant to 35 miles per hour. I find that it's a really good warm pant, and it's roomy enough, spacious enough that when it's really super cold and you need that extra warmth, you can put a base layer underneath it. Now the pant is really fairly simple in design. There's no belt loops. There's a pull string to adjust the waist. There is some elastic in the waistband. It's got a zippered pocket, a hand pocket on both sides. The pant is really stretchable. It has a generous fit on the upper part. It tapers down to a more narrow fit towards the bottom. It has zippered legs, and there's elastic along the base of the pant, which helps it seal out the snow around the cuff. If your boots have an exoskeleton with a power strap like most of the soft boots do these days, you can essentially strap this power strap around over the top of the pant leg, and there just isn't going to be any snow that gets in there. Now the pants aren't waterproof. They're water and rain resistant. These are the pants that I use when I'm skiing a groom trail, when I'm skiing, skate skiing. They take aerobic activity really well, and they have probably the widest comfort range of any cross-country ski pants I've ever had. So they allow you to use them when it's warm, and they're also warm when it's cold. And they dry real quick. Now if I'm skiing in the backcountry and there's deep powder snow, or if it happens to be colder, a lot of times you'll see that I'm wearing gaiters with these pants. These gaiters are made by Outdoor Research. They're Gore-Tex They go on quite easily. They come up to the knee. You know, they're absolutely waterproof. You know, if you're breaking through snow all the time and you just have the contact between your pant and the snow, this just makes the whole situation a lot more warm and secure. So you might be wondering, is there anything that I don't like about these pants? I like them for just about everything. But when I don my plastic boots, they're not suitable for that. And the main reason, it's not because of comfort, it's because of the narrow leg section. It just won't go over the top of the outside of a big plastic boot. So when I'm using my plastic boots, I'll switch over to more of a backcountry downhill pant. Now, of course, this is the clothing that I would use for what I would call rolling terrain, typical backcountry, cross-country skiing. And if I step things up, if I'm going to climb to a top of a high peak, high elevation, if I'm going to be using my plastic boots and my more downhill-oriented gear, then there's a different set of equipment that I carry. Some of it's the same and some of it's different, and we'll cover that next. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking, especially when you check the links below, that some of this clothing seems awful expensive, and it is. And one thing is for sure, you don't need expensive clothing to go out and enjoy your backcountry skiing. I'm kind of an old fart, and I've been at this a long time. So I started back in the 70s when wool was the thing, and you wore wool knickers and long socks, gaiters and powder pants when it was required, and it all worked really well. I know that wool has kind of made a resurgence, and I myself, I won't be going back to it. If you want to hear a funny story, back in the 70s when I was in college, obviously we didn't have a lot of money. And at the time, knickers were pretty expensive. And so what we do is we'd go to the secondhand store and we'd buy old wool pants off of men's suits. What we do is we'd take those old wool suit pants and we'd cut them down to knicker length and then form the knee a little tighter and make it so they fit like a knicker. And we'd get by with knickers for probably a couple bucks in the day. And I have to laugh, you know, clothing fashions come and go. I've often wondered whether or not the wool knicker will ever make a resurgence. Somehow I think not. One thing you don't need to be when you're backcountry skiing is fashionable. And I think it's funny if somebody thinks I'm fashionable. I tend to wear what works, and what works I keep for a long time. And I don't do a lot of searching around when it comes to clothing. I'm very happy with my current selection.